Something is silently destroying your peace. It's not your workload, it's not the economy, it's not your past. It's the people around you who smile to your face but silently hurt your mind. People who call themselves friends but silently sabotage your growth. You can't grow if you're surrounded by people who drag you down. You can't grow stronger with people who fear your power. And you can't gain clarity by spending time with minds filled with noise. So I ask you, who do you let into your company? Who has access to your mind, your time, and your soul? Because your life is the average of the emotional energy you allow around you. Today, we're going to expose 10 types of people who silently destroy your self-worth, steal your peace, and make you doubt your strength. More importantly, you will learn to separate from them not through anger but through emotional intelligence, self-control, and psychological boundaries that no one can cross if you are willing to stop tolerating what weakens you. Like to support the movement of discipline we are building. Follow so you don't miss out on tools to protect your peace and increase your strength. The truth is simple. Not everyone deserves access to your life, and today we will show you exactly who needs to be removed and how to move forward in silence stronger, sharper, and untouchable. Let's start. Don't explain your philosophy. Live it. Epictetus 1. The whiner. You know the type. They don't shout, they don't attack, but every conversation with them is like someone dropping acid into your mind. They complain about their jobs, they complain about their lovers, they complain about the weather, the government, society, everything but themselves. And worst of all, they do nothing to change it as complaining becomes an emotional weapon. Why is complaining dangerous? At first glance, complaining seems harmless. Who doesn't vent a little now and then? But it's not an occasional thing. Complainers aren't looking for solutions. They're talking to reinforce a worldview of bitterness, helplessness, and blame. If you're not careful, you'll start to see life through their lens. Suddenly, your job feels inadequate. Your relationship seems to be in trouble. Your once rock-solid peace begins to crack. This isn't a coincidence. This is emotional contagion. What does the philosophy of complaining say about complainers? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you wake up each morning, tell yourself that today you will meet meddlesome people, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and unpleasant, not to be pessimistic, but to be prepared." Because a Stoic does not expect people to be perfect, but they refuse to be spoiled by the shortcomings of others. Complainers violate Stoic values. They refuse to take personal responsibility. They do not control their emotions. They cultivate resentment as a badge of honor. In Stoic philosophy, chronic complaining is a sign of a weak, untrained mind, a mind that cannot distinguish between what is controllable and what is uncontrollable. Why should you keep your distance from complainers? Not because they are evil, but because they are infected. An emotional infection spreads silently. They sow doubt in your self-confidence. They magnify small annoyances into big problems. They make you feel guilty for having a peace they don't have. This is how they drain your mental energy without raising their voice. How to handle a whiner like a courtesan? Set psychological boundaries with strategic silence. You don't need to argue or correct them. Just stop adding fuel to the fire. The next time someone whines about the same problem for the third time, ask, "It sounds really annoying. What are you going to do to fix it?" If they avoid or change the subject, you've exposed the truth. They don't want a solution, they want empathy. Remind yourself that your energy is sacred. Just because someone is venting doesn't mean you have to give them your attention. Your inner peace is a form of wealth, and you have the right to protect it with absolute discipline. Create emotional distance if you can't cut them off completely. Reduce the depth. Be polite, but don't let their chaos get into your soul. You're not obligated to be an unpaid therapist for anyone, especially those addicted to their own misery. Emotional intelligence is knowing when to listen and when to leave the room. Whiners don't want change, they want attention. And if you're not careful, you'll become their next whiner. Remember, your peace is your power. Protect it relentlessly. 2. The excuse maker. Have you ever met someone who always has an excuse? Why they haven't started, why they can't change, or why life is so hard. They're not unintelligent, they're not lacking opportunities, but they constantly blame circumstances, the past, or bad timing. This is the excuse maker, and if you're not careful, they'll infect you with self-doubt,
complacency, and a lesser version of your potential. Why are excuses more dangerous than failure? Excuses don't look toxic. In fact, they often sound very reasonable. I want to do it, but now it's not the time. Not everyone can succeed. Some people are just lucky. Discipline isn't my thing. What's the truth? Excuses are just fear disguised as reasons. They create a false sense of comfort so you don't have to face the insecurities of growing up. But at the cost of your ambition, your self-worth, and your evolution. Why keep your distance from excuse energy? Being around an excuse maker is like running a marathon with chains on your feet. You start to think maybe you're trying too hard, maybe you should lower your goals, maybe discipline is too extreme. And before you know it, you start to believe that average is enough and excellence is an obsession. But the hard truth is that growth requires friction. Self-control requires responsibility. You can't build a high-performance mindset and an environment that encourages excuses and punishes effort. Dealing with an excuse maker is hard. Lead by action, not argument. The Stoic don't argue, they show. Let your habits, consistency, and discipline speak for themselves. You don't need to prove them wrong, just show what is possible when you take responsibility for your life. Be careful with your inner voice. Excuse makers often infuse their thinking into your language. Be aware when you say things like, I will try, I will do it when I have time. Now is not the time. Instead, say, I will. This is important to start now. This is emotional intelligence. Choose language that promotes action, not avoidance. Build boundaries around your energy. You don't need to cut people off, but you do need to protect time and space from people who normalize self-sabotage. If someone is always justifying procrastination and it affects your focus, back off and reflect. Who in your life always has reasons not to act? Have their words ever made you doubt your ambition or speed yourself up? Are you making decisions based on logic and values or on the fear of others? The more you sweat in silence, the less you bleed with regret. Excusers are not bad people, but they are dangerous to your discipline. They teach you to accept mediocrity, soften your edge, delay your greatness until life is perfect. But know that life is never perfect. Only your effort is. Choose effort, choose action. And if you must go alone, go with pride. 3. The gossiper. You know the type. They always know everything. Who is dating them, who failed, who said what did wrong. Their conversation is fascinating, mixed with secrets and soaked in insecurity. They seem interesting on the surface, but underneath they reveal a deeper truth. Gossip is the coin of the emotionally weak. Why is gossip not harmless? Gossip is not only a habit, it is a thought pattern rooted in judgment, envy, and comparison. If you are around them long enough, you will become like them. You will start to doubt others based on rumors. You waste mental energy on rumors instead of results. You train your mind to look outwards instead of inwards. That is the real cost of gossip. It takes you away from your values and personal growth. What does the Stoic philosophy say about gossip? Stoics believed that a virtuous life begins with the simple choice to focus on what you can control. Gossip goes against this principle. It revolves around what other people do, say, or fail to do. Things that are not in your control. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste time arguing about what a good person should be. Be that person." Gossiping keeps you in a state of observing, never acting. It makes it easier to talk about other people's mistakes than to fix your own. Why do gossipers threaten your self-worth? Gossipers gossip about you. You are just a temporary tool for them. They build false intimacy through general judgment. They bond by putting others down. If you engage even passively, you are accepting their weakness. More importantly, you weaken yourself. Every moment you spend gossiping is a moment you are not building your self-worth, not developing your character, not practicing mental discipline, not dealing with gossipers in a disciplined way. Don't engage. Withdraw gracefully. Silence is the most powerful weapon.
If someone starts to gossip, just say, I don't know them well enough to say anything. Or talk about something that will actually help us grow. You don't need to blame them, just refuse to participate in their mental laziness. Focus on what you control. You can't stop others from talking, but you can stop your mind from absorbing the noise. Every time you focus on other people's mistakes, you stunt your own growth. That's a luxury you can't afford if you want to be self-reliant. Examine your environment. Ask yourself, who in my life enjoys other people's failures? Who constantly talks about others but rarely talks about ideas, goals, or growth? Then act accordingly. You have no obligation to tolerate weakness, no matter how seductive it may seem. Self-reflection question. Have you ever repeated gossip and then regretted it? Are your conversations focused on other people or on yourself? Do you have enough self-respect to walk away from useless conversation? Strong minds talk about ideas. Weak minds talk about people. The sadist doesn't need your judgment. He needs your absence. For every second you spend on their arguments, you starve your discipline. In a disciplined life, you don't have time for distractions. You have a mission. You have a mind to protect. You have peace to preserve. 4. The envious. There are people whose silence speaks louder than words. They don't clap when you win. They don't respond when you share good news. They look you in the eye but secretly hope you fail. That's the envious. If you keep them close, they not only envy your success, but also silently sabotage your peace, confidence, and self-worth. Why is jealousy dangerous? Jealousy isn't always an insult or a criticism. Sometimes it comes in the form of insincere compliments, fake smiles, or sudden distance after you've made progress. They ask, don't you think you're overreacting? Jealous people don't target your weaknesses, they target your strengths, because your growth reminds them of what they choose not to pursue. And deep down, it hurts. What does Stoicism have to say about jealousy? Stoicism sees jealousy as irrational because it focuses on what others have instead of what you could become. Epictetus reminds us if we want to improve, we must be content with being seen as foolish or foolish. Why? Because true growth is about detaching ourselves from the approval of others. Jealous people measure their self-worth by comparison. When you rise, they feel small. Instead of growing with you, they try to drag you down to theirs in subtle, constant, and sometimes cruel ways. The emotional cost of being around a jealous person. When you keep a jealous person around for too long, you start to shrink yourself to make them feel comfortable. You hesitate to share joy. You downplay success so as not to be seen as too much. You gradually believe that your light is a burden. That is not humility, that is self-sabotage. How to handle a jealous person in a strict manner? Practice detachment. Their feelings are not your burden. If someone is jealous of your growth, it is their wound, not yours. You can be kind, but it is not your responsibility to fix their insecurities, to protect your victories. Not everyone deserves to know about your success. Share less. Grow in silence until you find people who celebrate with you, not compete with you. Replace envy with admiration. When you see someone succeed, be curious instead of comparing. Ask me what I learned from their journey. And when you succeed, celebrate without shame, because a high-performance mindset includes self-respect. Questions for self-reflection. Who stays silent when you share good news? Do you dim your light to avoid provoking others? Are you surrounded by people who cheer you on or silently compete with you? Your success will test more relationships than your failure. Jealousy is not about you. It is about what others refuse to face within themselves. But if you feed their energy, you will gradually mirror their mindset. Remember, peace does not come from shrinking. It comes from standing with clarity, ethics, and a steely mind. 5. Head hots. You know the type, the one who yells at the waiter or bangs on the door when things go wrong, turns every disagreement into a battlefield, and leaves a trail of emotional wreckage in their wake. They are the head hots, the ones who mistake emotional outbursts for strength. But the truth is that people driven by anger are not strong. They're possessed. If you hang around them for too long, you risk becoming like them, overreacting, unstable, and ultimately weak. Why is anger not a strength? Modern culture often glorifies anger as passion or power, but look at it differently. Seneca said, anger is a short-lived madness. Control it or it will control you. Anger makes you vulnerable to manipulation. It clouds reason. It trades long-term wisdom for short-term dominance. In other words, anger is the emotion of the undisciplined. What does Stoic philosophy say about head hots? The essence of Stoicism is self-control, the ability to manage the mind no matter what the outside world throws at you.
But head-hots live in a state of constant exposure, of emotion. They are slaves to stimuli, to insults they explode, to delays they throw tantrums. Plans change, they fall apart. That's not strength, that's predictability. And predictability is weakness. Because if the world can easily provoke you, you're not in control. Your environment is. The way head-hots sabotage you. When you're around head-hots for too long, you start to normalize their behavior. You brace yourself for explosions. You walk on eggshells, you start to justify their outbursts. They're just that, but what is the psychological cost? Your emotional security is compromised. Your nervous system is on the defensive. You start to react to life instead of responding with clarity. Worse, their anger gradually trains your mind. You believe that reacting is strength, when in fact reacting is surrender. The Stoic way of handling angry people. Master yourself before you try to manage them. You don't put out the fire by pouring fuel on it. Stoic people don't respond to anger with anger. They neutralize chaos with calm. When someone explodes, you observe, you breathe, you detach. This is not weakness, this is emotional intelligence under pressure. Withdraw your emotional availability. Anger addicts feed on your reactions. They want to provoke to justify their behavior. Take away that fuel. Respond with clarity or don't respond at all and let them burn in their own fire. Choose peace over intimacy. If someone's anger constantly violates your peace, leave. Not out of hatred, but on principle. You don't need to fix them, you need to protect yourself. Boundaries are not punishments, they're protections. Self-reflection question. Who in your life can't get through a day without losing control? Have you ever reacted more violently just because they did and felt normal? Do you mistake silence for weakness, or do you understand that it's strength? Whoever makes you angry controls you. Anger may seem powerful, but it destroys everything it touches. Careers, relationships, reputations, peace. Others know that the calmest person in the room is often the strongest, because they don't waste energy trying to prove strength, they preserve it. If someone in your circle is constantly on fire, let them burn themselves out. You weren't born to fight, you were born to dominate. 6. The brawler. You walk into a room and they're there. Tears, chaos, accusations, everything is urgent, everything is personal, everything revolves around them. You listen, comfort, problem solve, but it never ends. You're not in a friendship. You're stuck in a storm that never ends, and it's not your storm. You're dealing with a brawler. A brawler isn't an emotion, it's an emotional manipulation. A brawler doesn't just feel deeply, they create chaos to control the connection. They blow small issues into life-changing crises. They drag multiple people into every conflict. There's sometimes the victim, sometimes the hero, sometimes the villain, all in one day. Why? Because fighting feeds them. It gives them attention, meaning, and a false sense of importance. But for you, it depletes your emotional clarity, drains your peace, and pulls you out of harmony with your values. What does Stoic philosophy say about emotional chaos? Stoics have a core principle: don't react, respond. The quarrelsome person violates this principle with every breath. They need you to react, it's their fuel. But the Stoic mind doesn't play that game. It's not loud. It doesn't engage in unchosen battles. Because the moment you react to a quarrel, you lose discipline. And without discipline, your peace is for sale. The psychological cost of living in someone else's chaos. Around a quarrelsome person is like being constantly tired without knowing why. You overthink conversations that should be simple. You feel guilty for setting boundaries or needing space. They teach you that calm is cold, stillness is betrayal, self-centeredness is selfish. But the stark truth is that peace is not selfish, it is sacred. The way to handle argumentative people is to stop trying to fix them. They don't want solutions, they want attention. You're not their therapist or savior. You're responsible for your emotional energy, not theirs. Practice the art of silent detachment. Don't defend yourself, don't explain, don't react. Let them explode, spiral, rage, while you remain the calm in their storm. Set psychological boundaries and enforce them. It's not enough to say, "I need space." You have to take it seriously, reinforce it, and live it. Cut the cord between their chaos and your identity. You can care for someone without taking everything on them. Self-reflection question. Who turns every moment into a spotlight on them? Do you feel exhausted, guilty, or out of control after interacting with them? Do you mistake arguments for depth and emotional instability for connection? Emotional maturity is not a response to chaos, it's a return to clarity. People who like arguments don't want peace, they want attention. And if you don't protect yourself, you'll mistake exhaustion for love. But a sobering reminder that peace does not come from avoiding conflict. It comes from refusing, from getting into unnecessary fights. So, next time someone tries to drag you into their storm, stand your ground, keep your composure, stay indomitable.
The 7 pessimists don't scream. They don't create chaos like the reformers. They don't explode like the hotheads. They are calm, polite, reasonable, and extremely corrosive. They are pessimists. They cover their doubts with logic and their fears with good advice. They don't attack your dreams head on. They whisper, "Are you sure it's realistic? What if it doesn't work?" That's a bit risky, don't you think? It sounds like concern, but it's actually poison in the form of worry, the subtle power of negative influence. Pessimists don't need to raise their voices. Their words echo in your head long after they've left. Why? Because they don't just doubt your ideas, they make you doubt yourself. You start second-guessing your vision. You tone down your ambition. You trade caution for courage, not because you think it's right, but because someone doesn't believe in you. That's the power of the pessimist, and it's more dangerous than public criticism. What Stoic philosophy says about pessimists. Stoicism teaches us to filter everything through reason, not fear. But pessimists make fear feel like reason. They confuse pessimism with reality, insecurity with intelligence. Warning, it's not the things that bother us, it's how we interpret them. Pessimists are masters of distorted interpretation. They don't see what could be right, they only shine a light on what could be wrong. If you let them get too close, they will slowly erode your confidence under the guise of reality. The way pessimists shape a life is not yours. Many people fail not because they succeed, but because they never start. Why? Because someone said it couldn't. Be careful, who do you think you are? And that voice repeats itself over and over again until it becomes their inner voice. Now they live safe but not satisfied, secure but not confident, comfortable but not courageous. The way to handle pessimists is to be careful, to separate intentions from effects. Not all pessimists are malicious. Some people really think they're protecting you, but that doesn't change the outcome. If their words make you shrink, stop, or quiet, they're not helpful. Be kind but clear. I appreciate the concern, but I believe in my vision. Locke responds through logic, not emotion. Before accepting criticism, ask, is this based on data or fear? Is it based on experience or prediction? Are they on the path they are trying to convince me to abandon? If the answer is no, dismiss it quietly, forcefully. Build an inner wall of consistency. Other people don't need approval from everyone. They need inner harmony. When your intentions are rooted in ethics, maturity, truth, and courage, you don't beg for approval, you act. Self-reflection question. Who always plays devil's advocate but never supports your potential? Have you ever panicked about a dream because someone couldn't see it? Are you building your life based on your values or their fears? Don't let other people's limitations guide your decisions. Pessimists don't destroy you. They just instill enough fear to destroy you, but carve into you the antidote of self-control and inner confidence. A rational mind doesn't have to react. The next time someone says it's too ambitious, respond only to those who stop dreaming and keep walking. 8. Toxic optimists. We live in a world that worships positivity. Smile more, think happy thoughts, keep only good vibrations. It sounds inspiring until it becomes a trap. Because not every moment needs to feel good, and not every truth needs to be sugar-coated. Some storms must be faced, not denied. But toxic optimists don't believe that. They cover every wound with glitter. They call suffering a low vibration. They see honesty, emotion as weakness. And if you're not careful, they'll blind you to the sunlight. The lie behind constant positivity. At first glance, they seem helpful. They're optimistic, cheerful, always upbeat. But when life gets tough, and it will, they respond with things like, just be positive, don't think about it. Everything happens for a reason.
What it really means is, I don't want to face your reality. I'd rather walk through the pain than help you face it. Let's pretend everything is okay when it's not. This isn't support, this is mental avoidance. And Stoicism doesn't tolerate denial disguised as encouragement. Why does toxic optimism violate Stoicism? Stoicism isn't about pretending life is good, it's about preparing for the bad times. It teaches us to face suffering with courage, not cover it up with empty phrases. Marcus Aurelius didn't say ignore the storm. He said you have control over your mind, not over external events. That means we acknowledge the storm, but don't let it control our inner weather. Toxic optimists do the opposite. They ignore the storm completely and teach you to feel guilty for not smiling through disaster. The harm of forced optimism. When you're around someone who constantly avoids reality, you stop expressing yourself honestly. You bury your emotions instead of processing them. You start to associate sadness with failure, and that's dangerous because buried pain doesn't go away. It festers into anxiety, resentment, isolation, and eventually emotional detachment. Stoics know that suffering is a teacher if you're willing to listen, but toxic optimists teach you to ignore that teacher and just smile. How to handle a toxic optimist the Stoic way. Replace forced optimism with rational optimism. Discipline isn't negative, it is preparation. Discipline asks, what can I control? What can I learn? What can I endure? You don't need blind faith, you need clear vision combined with real action. Creating space for emotional honesty. You are allowed to say, this hurts, this is hard, I haven't figured it out yet. That's not weakness, that's intelligence and emotion. And any relationship that doesn't allow that isn't safe for your growth. Stop confusing denial with intelligence. If someone constantly tells you to avoid negative thoughts, ask if they're really helping you grow or just keeping you comfortable in an illusion. Pain is real, and being Stoic doesn't avoid it. It teaches you to work through it. Self-reflection question. Do you feel safe expressing pain or always having to pretend to be okay? Have you ever hidden your struggles to make others comfortable? Are you around people who validate your growth or deny your reality? Stoic people don't deny emotions, they work through truth. Toxic optimism doesn't heal, it hides, and whatever you hide will eventually control you. But when you face life with open eyes, even if it's uncomfortable, you will take back your power. The next time someone says, just think positive, respond, I will think clearly, I will act wisely, I will feel deeply and still rise. That is not a low vibration, that is inner strength. 9. People live in the role of victim. We've all been hurt, betrayed, rejected, belittled, underestimated. Pain is part of life, but staying stuck in it is a choice. People who live in the role of victim don't just feel pain, they wear it like a uniform. Their wounds become their identity. Their pain becomes a conversation starter. Their helplessness becomes a comfort zone. If you hold them too close, they will invite you into their world. A world where nothing is their fault and everything is someone else's responsibility. When victimhood becomes a way of life, there is a difference between being a victim and living like a victim. Everyone experiences injustice, but the meticulous person refuses to let that define him. Victims repeat the same story, blaming others, the system, or the universe, and avoid growing by saying, this is who I am now. But that's not identity, that's emotional abandonment. If you absorb it for too long, you'll start to believe that healing is impossible, that you should lower your expectations, that you're hurt too. What does Stoic philosophy say about power and responsibility? Epictetus lost his freedom of body and status, but not his mind. He said no one is free unless he owns himself. Stoics don't deny suffering, but they refuse to be defined by it. Being Stoic means saying, yes, this happened. Yes, it hurts, but now what am I going to do about it? That's not denial, that's autonomy. The danger of being around victim energy. When you're around someone who lives in a victim state for too long, you become their therapist instead of their friend. You absorb their helpless worldview. You feel guilty for not being able to motivate them. No hope or ambition. Most dangerously, you start to confuse survival with strength. But Stoicism isn't about survival, it is about transcendence. Because surviving the past is not the goal, moving beyond it is. A different way of dealing with people living in the victim role. Empathizing, but not enabling. You can care without being a burden.
Support their healing, but not validate their stagnation. Say, I understand your pain, but I also see your strength. What do you want to do with it? Draw boundaries between emotions and identity. Feeling lost is normal, but building a home there is not. If someone defines themselves only by what hurts them, you must protect your emotional boundaries.
They seek validation for their story, not growth from it. But if you stay in their orbit for too long, you will forget that you are allowed to move past it. You will stop growing because you are too busy saving. Hard says you are not defined by what broke you. You are defined by how you rebuild. Don't sink down to prove empathy. Rise up and let that be your calling. 10. The manipulator. Not all threats are loud. Some come in the form of kindness, compliments with obligations. Silent support erodes confidence, smiles that take away your voice. You are not being attacked, you are being manipulated, and that makes it dangerous. Manipulators don't speak loudly, they increase self-doubt. They distort your emotions so you can't tell if you're the problem or they are. Manipulation is not about power, it is about distraction. The goal of the manipulator is not to dominate, but to disorient you. They want you to doubt your decisions, apologize for setting boundaries, feel guilty for saying no, because if you stay confused, you are vulnerable to control, and the more emotionally intelligent you are, the more they exploit that. They know you will listen, care, and hesitate before leaving. That is the trap. If you don't, you'll find yourself over-explaining, over-giving, apologizing too often, and undervaluing yourself. What does the Stoic philosophy say about emotional sovereignty? Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of life depends on the quality of your thoughts." But manipulators don't want you to believe your thoughts. They want to insert their own thoughts. They erode your confidence until you seek clarity from them. The narcissist refuses this. Because in narcissism, true freedom is not external freedom. It is mental clarity, the ability to think for yourself, to feel without distortion, and to act in accordance with your values, not someone else's agenda. Signs you're dealing with a manipulator. You feel guilty when you set boundaries. You find yourself having to explain decisions that don't need explaining. They reward you when you comply and distance you when you don't. Your self-worth is slowly eroded without you knowing why. This is not connection. This is emotional invasion. And if you don't guard your mind, someone else will. How to deal with a manipulator in a narcissistic way. Be careful. Take back your inner power. You don't owe anyone an explanation for what protects your peace. If someone makes you feel bad about respecting your boundaries, it's not love, it's a trap. A careful person knows my peace is mine to keep, not yours to negotiate. Watch patterns, not words. Manipulators are good at words. They say the right things, but repeat the same behavior. Don't listen to promises. Watch their patterns and then decide clearly whether their presence is consistent with your principles. Enforce boundaries without letting emotions leak. You don't need to get angry or prove anything. Just act, leave, limit access, speak clearly, and then let your absence reinforce what you said. This is strategic detachment, the ultimate form of protecting the feelings of others. A reflective question: do you feel lighter or heavier after interacting with them? Do you do things that are inappropriate just to keep the peace? Do you minimize your voice to keep them comfortable? Manipulators don't take your power. They convince you to give it up, but know that you don't need to fight for control. You just need to let go of the need for their approval. When you own your emotions, own your mind, you become unmanipulatable. And that is true inner strength. 11. The drifter. They laugh loudly, say things like, "Come on, don't take yourself so seriously. Life is short. Treat yourself. Discipline is impossible forever." They don't shout, they don't insult, but their influence is quietly corrosive. This is the drifter, the one who makes mediocrity a way of life and weakness sound like freedom. The lie of the drifter lifestyle. They promote pleasure over purpose, escape over endurance, instant gratification over inner growth. They don't call it weakness, they call it living in the moment, freedom, self-love. But what they're really saying is, I avoid inconvenience, I fear discipline, I don't want to face my better self. If you don't recognize this subtle erosion, you'll start calling your compromises balance. What does the Stoic philosophy say about indulgence? The Stoic isn't against pleasure, but they know that pleasure without principles leads to slavery. Epictetus says, freedom is the only worthwhile goal in life, but you can't be free if you're a slave to your passions. Drifting isn't freedom, it's dependence with a nicer label. When you surround yourself with mediocre people who pass off laziness, overeating, irresponsibility, or emotional numbness as self-care, you begin to build a lifestyle that feels good but rottens you from the inside. The price of indulging drifters is that you postpone your goals because there's always tomorrow. You give up inconvenience, and with it, growth. You stop demanding excellence from yourself because no one else around will. Gradually, mediocrity becomes a culture, and you stop striving because no one reminds you that you can. The way to deal with drifters is to be disciplined. Don't argue. Outdo them with discipline. You don't need to convince anyone to change. Just be the opposite model. Let your habits, clarity, and focus speak for themselves, louder than the noise of their indulgence. Discipline is liberating. For the undisciplined, structure is like a prison. For the rigid, it is the path to freedom. Discipline is not punishment. It is the ultimate expression of self-respect, protecting your inner environment. If you are constantly around people who mock structure, minimize growth, and avoid challenge, change your environment. You don't need to become a monk, but you do need to protect your momentum as if your life depends on it, because it really depends on the question of self-reflection. Have you ever justified self-sabotage by calling it self-love? Who encourages comfort over commitment? Are you living with intention or just reacting to pleasure? True freedom is not about doing whatever you want. It is about having the power to do what serves your highest self. The indulgent person has no bad intentions, but they normalize habits that keep you mediocre. And in a world that worships ease, discipline is rebellion. Live with restraint, speak with purpose, and build a life that makes indulgence look like a cheap substitute for what you really came here to do. In conclusion, you've seen it. Not just the obvious enemies, but the subtle enemies, the sweet ones, the ones who silently drain your spirit with whispers, not shouts. They call it friendship, but their patterns tell a different story. They whine and call it connection. They lie and call it protection. They manipulate and call it love. They normalize weakness and call it freedom. And you've spent enough time tolerating what you know in your heart is eroding your soul. Now what? Like if this has lit a fire to protect your emotional boundaries. Subscribe to ThinkCot K101 for daily wisdom that strengthens your mind. Share with someone who is ready to let go of what weakens them. And leave a comment. I defend my peace. I defend my path. Let the world know you are no longer ready for chaos. Remember, you don't rise by being accepted. You rise by being unyielding, walking in silence, standing in truth, and rising like no one saw it coming.